All right, let's jump right in. I've got a question for you, and it sounds simple, but stick with me. Who owns your story? I mean, the obvious answer is you do, right? Your memories, your experiences. But what if I told you that the story of you is actually co-authored by, well, pretty much the entire world around you?
So, let's just get right to it. Think about those memories you hold so dear. You know, the ones that make you, you. Are they truly 100% yours? Or is there something else going on behind the scenes? The answer, I promise, might just change the way you see yourself.
I mean, think about it like this. Remember the first time a grandparent or an older relative told you a story about a war or some other huge historical event? All of a sudden, a boring date from a history book wasn't just a number anymore. It had a face, a voice. You could feel it. That incredible transformation, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
And that brings us to our first kind of mind-bending idea. It sounds a little strange to say out loud, but your memory isn't really yours. Not completely. Our memories aren't just these perfect little personal recordings of what happened.
Instead, they're in this constant conversation with the history and the culture all around us. Your personal story and the world story, they're not running on separate tracks. No way. They're constantly intersecting, weaving together into this intricate tapestry.
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, we need to get clear on the two big players in this game, the personal and the public.
So on one hand, you've got your individual biography. Simple enough, right? That's the unique story of your life, your experiences, your memories, the stuff that happened to you. But then on the other hand, there's this thing called collective memory. And that's the shared story, the official story, you could say, that a whole group tells about itself. Think of it as the story of us, whether us as a nation, a community, or even a small family.
And here's the kicker. These two things aren't just sitting next to each other. They're in what's called a symbiotic relationship. It's like a feedback loop. Think of a really good conversation where what you say changes what I say, and what I say changes what you say next. The big collective story shapes your personal story. But, and this is crucial, your story can then echo back and actually change that bigger story.
And hey, this isn't some brand new idea we just came up with. A sociologist named Maurice Hobwalks absolutely nailed this concept like 100 years ago. He argued that we literally can't remember things in a vacuum. We need frameworks to hang our memories on. Things like language, cultural symbols, even holiday traditions. Those are the structures that give our personal memory shape. Without them, our memories would just be, well, a mess.
So the big question is, how does this actually work? How does the giant story of history get woven into the tiny personal story of your life? Well, let's break it down.
It's basically a four-step cycle that's always turning. So, step 1, the collective memory gives us a kind of blueprint for how to understand the world. Step 2, that blueprint gets transmitted to us. Step 3, the blueprint starts to shape our own personal biography, our memories. And then step 4, and this is the really powerful part, our individual stories can feed back into the system and actually change the collective memory. It's not static, it's a living, breathing thing.
And this whole transmission process, it happens through three main channels that you probably interact with every single day: family, society, and the media.
First up, family. This is the most intimate channel, right? It's where history stops being just facts and gets an emotional core. It's in those stories from our elders, the holiday rituals we do without even thinking, and the values we pick up just by being part of our family.
Then, stepping outside the home, you have society's institutions. Think about it. School textbooks, museums, public monuments, even the legal system. These are all powerful storytellers, and they tend to present a very specific official version of the past that reinforces the dominant collective memory.
And finally, of course, there's the media, and it is everywhere. News reports, documentaries, blockbuster movies, and yeah, even social media. They are constantly shaping and reshaping how we see the past. Just think about how one popular movie can basically define an entire historical era for millions of people, for better or for worse.
Okay, this all sounds pretty theoretical, so let's get into some real-world examples. Let's look at a few cases where you can see this dynamic in action, where one story truly changed everything.
Let's start with Joan of Arc. I mean, what a story, right? A peasant girl who says she has divine visions and then goes on to lead an entire army. Her individual biography was so powerful, so compelling, that it was completely absorbed into France's collective memory. She went from being a real person to being this larger-than-life national icon of French resilience. It's a perfect example of how one person's life can become the foundation of a national myth. Now, for a very different and much more somber example, the Holocaust. The historical statistics are just staggering. The numbers are so huge that they can almost become abstract, you know? It's hard to really grasp the human reality of it.
But then you hear one personal story. You listen to one survivor's testimony, and it changes everything. It slices right through the abstract numbers and forces you to confront the very real, very human cost. Those individual biographies, they're the absolute bedrock of our global collective memory of that horror. They are what turned a historical event into an unforgettable moral lesson for humanity.
Now, this dynamic can also work in the other direction. Collective memory can be used as a weapon to suppress stories. In the Soviet Union, for instance, the official state narrative was all about a glorious revolution and the triumph of the people. So what happened to the individual stories that didn't fit? The stories of dissidents, of the victims of purges, of life in the gulag? They were actively suppressed, literally erased, to protect the official story. It's a really stark reminder that memory isn't neutral. It can be a political battleground.
Okay, so we've looked at history, but what does all this mean for you, right now? Let's bring this all back home and think about our own sense of self.
This brings us to a really cool philosophical idea called the narrative self. And the big takeaway here is that your identity, who you think you are, isn't a fixed thing. It's a story that you are constantly writing and telling about yourself. And the ingredients for that story, the characters, the plot twists, the big themes, they're all handed to you by the culture and history you live in.
And that, as you can imagine, has some pretty profound ethical implications. Because if our very sense of who we are is built from shared stories, then it matters a whole lot whose stories get told and whose gets silenced. Who gets to be the author of our collective memory? That's a question of power.
Which leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If our most private, personal stories are actually co-authored by history and by society, then what does it really mean to be an individual? It seems the story of you is and always will be a part of the story of us.